Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the Moscow Mules. I'm Shay Bowes, and I'm joined by Mitya, our star producer, who's going to help us navigate through some of the numbers and videos as we take a sideways look at some of the stories that the mainstream media may prefer were kept silent. And tonight we're going to start in the Big Apple. Now, the Big Apple is in some ways now the rotten apple. It's got a lot of problems. Vast immigration. Crime is on the rise. But certain parts of it seem to be that little bit more rotten than the others. And I'm talking about the New York Times. Now, this is quite a grim story. It's the story of the alleged rape of one of the victims of the October 7th attack by Hamas. This lady, Gal Abdush, has become a cause célèbre in the Western media. And the story that was written by the New York Times alleged sexual assault by Hamas, but her family have come out to completely deny it. Now, why is this such an interesting story? It's interesting because the mainstream media, who you're meant to rely on for your news, are telling lies. And it's not just me that's saying that, it's her family, this girl, this victim's family, her brother, her sister, taken to social media to say this stuff never happened. And we've got some video, Mitya, of the actual top investigative reporter in the New York Times. And he's got something to say about the whole thing, hasn't he?
Yeah, let's see it. This is Mr. Gettleman, who is an investigative reporter, replying why wasn't there any evidence to your story? Let's take a look.
Check it out.
I don't want to even use the word evidence, because evidence is almost like a legal term that suggests you're trying to prove an allegation or prove a case in court. That's not my role. We all have our roles, and my role is to document, is to present information, to give people a voice. So this is an investigative reporter saying, let's not do the evidence thing. That's like turning up at a hospital, right? With every bone in your body broken, and the surgeon saying, let's skip the x-rays and the scans. Yeah, you don't need them. That's a bit too medical. So this guy is the top investigative reporter in the New York Times.
He's just a storyteller.
He's just a storyteller.
Evidence. He's not in a court.
Yeah, now, more interestingly probably is the story about his co-author, a lady called Anat Schwartz. Now, Anat Schwartz, you might say, who is this woman who gets her first printed, published story in the New York Times onto the front page? Mitya, tell us a bit more about Anat Schwartz. Just this brilliant, dynamo of journalism? Or is there something else about Anat Schwartz that people at home should know about? I think there is.
Well, it turns out she never worked before, never wrote a piece before, but what she did was part of the Israeli army intelligence. You could just imagine the HR department in New York Times, the paper of records. No experience, Israeli intelligence.
Straight onto the front page. Straight onto the front page. Well, it seems to me that, once you're in, it's very difficult to get out. But this whole manipulation of truth really, really, really tells us a story about how the whole reality around what happened on October 7th and what's happened since has been weaponized by the mainstream media. And they're not the only people who like to tell stories as well. And when we move from stateside back into Europe, one of our favorite friends, Mr. Macron, the little Napoleon himself, has also got some stories to tell as well. Apparently, Mr. Macron now has decided that the French military would like to go back to Russia, maybe. Because the last time they went to Russia, remember, 600,000 of them got a one-way ticket and didn't manage to make it back, Mitya, during the Napoleonic Wars.
It's called the Grande Armée.
Yeah, the Grande Armée. So Mr. Macron, he likes a bit of drama, He's a man who likes his women like his wine, old and sweet, but he's also a guy that's prone to some storytelling. And he's been telling stories, and they're not that sort of plausible, are they, Mitya? Let's have a look at the video.
Tout a été évoqué ce soir, de manière très libre et directe. Il n'y a pas de consensus aujourd'hui pour envoyer de manière officielle, assumée et endossée des troupes au sol, mais en dynamique, rien ne doit être exclu.
Of course, Emmanuel isn't short of a few stories himself. He likes to make things up, and there's some, fantasies about the French army. Their tanks during World War II did have more than one gear reverse. But in reality, nowadays, the French army is in a lot of trouble, as is the French economy. The government's not just foolish. The farmers are actually dumping shit all over government buildings across France. France is in trouble, and the French aren't scared to go out and fire it up when things get pretty bad, as you can see. But here's the reality. There's a 10 billion euro cut regime being implemented in the army and in the public services in France. And Macron has made these promises before. The French post-colonial sort of regime is in trouble, and it's been in a lot of trouble, particularly in Niger, media.
Yeah, well, Macron has a Napoleon complex, right? He thinks he's still the emperor, but it's France. So he keeps promising things. For example, after the coup in Niger, this is what he said.
I believe our policy is the correct one. It's based on the courage of President Bazoum, on the efforts of our diplomats and our ambassador in Niger, who will stay despite pressure from coup leaders. We do not recognize them. We support the president, who's not resigned.
You know what happened? He didn't stay. The ambassador.
He didn't.
In a month,
it didn't work out.
He was gone.
Yeah.
But at least.
Or as they say, au revoir.
Another thing I wanted to show you is one more amazing diplomatic gesture, ideas, man, from Mr. Macron. This has something to do with the Middle East.
C'est pourquoi la France est prête à ce que la coalition internationale contre Daesh, dans le cadre de laquelle nous sommes engagés pour notre opération en Irak et en Syrie, puisse lutter aussi contre le Hamas. Je propose à nos partenaires internationaux, je l'ai évoqué avec vous ce matin, que nous puissions bâtir une coalition régionale et internationale pour lutter contre les groupes terroristes qui nous menacent tous.
Didn't happen.
You know how many people joined this coalition?
How many?
0.
Beautiful.
Zero.
Magnifique.
Magnifique.
Le grand zéro.
But he loves grand ideas.
I thought you were going to say he loves grannies. The great Napoleon once said, when your opponent is making a mistake, never interrupt him. So the boys up the road in the Kremlin here, to just leave these boys to screw the whole dish up themselves. Correct, Mitya?
Yeah, well, I don't know if anybody's taking you seriously at this point.
Yeah. Okay. So we're moving on. So talking colonialism and the end of colonialism. Of course, France is a great colonial power in its day, as the British were. There seems to be a new appetite for colonialism, and it's coming from some very interesting places. Most notably, the ex-CEO and founder of Blackwater. Mitya, let's have a listen to this dude.
And if so many of these countries around the world are incapable of governing themselves, then it's time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough. We're done being invaded. You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens.
Yeah, so this is the ex-head of Blackwater. And Blackwater have an absolutely atrocious track record. They're kind of like the East India Company on steroids. This is absolutely remarkable, Mitya. And it's not the only thing they've done. They got a track record in places like Iraq as well, right? It was just incredible.
Thank you, Julian Assange and a bunch of other journalists. We found out what Blackwater was up to in Iraq.
Exactly. Boom. So this is them basically joyriding through the streets of Baghdad, executing people. This is just completely up, okay? There's no other way to look at this. This is murder. Look, they're killing people, running over ordinary civilians. And these guys get massive contracts and basically hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars from the US state to do this. The guy who ran this show now wants to go to Africa and bring this brand of US diplomacy onto the ground in African countries. Is that for real, Mitya?
Yeah, I mean, if Africans, this is what they need. They need Eric Prince to govern,
So what's shocking about this is the fact that somebody like Eric Prince, now a very, very wealthy man, is at liberty. He's not in prison like some very notable people who are in jail in the UK right now for talking and telling you the story about this man's murderous escapade in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and now, unbelievably, they want to do it all again. Now, interestingly, if you want to commit the crime of regime change, you want to overturn a democracy, you need muscle. And you need men that are willing to do very bad things for money, like Mr. Prince's crew. Now, you also need people to influence the population. And we've got a whopper brewing right now, boys. Miss Navalnaya.
All we knew before, there's two things we knew. First of all, we knew that she was the wife of Navalny. And second, we found out from Mr. Biden that her name is Yolanda.
Is that Yolanda is she's going to continue the fight we had underway.
It's a very unusual name for a Russian woman.
Her name isn't Yolanda, is it?
No.
It's
Julia.
She's not Hispaniola, Navalnaya. She's Yulia.
But now she's a star.
She's a big star.
Let's take a look.
Let's check it out.
In a cowardly way, they're hiding his body, not showing to his mother, not giving to his mother. They're lying and they're waiting for the traces of another of Putin's Novichok to disappear.
Not according to Budanov, not according to the head of Ukraine's defense intelligence unit. And, you know, check out the Ukrainian defense, the SBU, the main intelligence directorate in Ukraine. Check out their logo. You know what it is? It's a sword piercing Russia. These boys aren't any fans of the boys up the road here in the Kremlin, but they say that Navalny wasn't killed with Novichok. He died from a blood clot. Mitya,
let's take a look.
Roll the video. He's such a star, isn't he? He's such a warm, cozy kind of guy. He's the kind of dude I bet your daughter would love to bring home to the wife.
Я можу вас розчарувати, але те, що нам відомо, він реально загинув від тромба. І це більш-менш підтверджено.
Тобто це природня...
Це те, що ми знаємо. Так.
Природня...
Це взято не з інтернету, давайте так вам скажу, але, на жаль, природня.
He's such a lovely character, isn't
Jay, why do you think he said this?
Well...
What is interesting, what is his deal?
Well, listen, you know what the reality here is? There's lots of rumors circulating, okay? I think the reality is there's a very high probability that Ukraine maybe whacked him. They got rid of him. Why? Who knows why? But there's people say, well, how could the Ukrainians get access to the prison? There's also some interesting facts about that, which you're not going to see on the mainstream media. There's actually video released by this sort of Russian pro-Ukrainian anti-Putin group who've been operating in Belgorod, killing civilians, of course. Very brave, these guys. They drive in, kill a few kids in a car and pull out after a massive victory. These are real tough guys. Now, but they did reveal video from within the prison where Navalny was. And that's quite remarkable. So if they could get the video, maybe they could get him too. Kachum.
But never mind. Ukrainians not a big fans of Navalny.
Well, surely his wife, Yulia, would have seen all this when she went to visit him in jail. Oh, hold on. She never went to visit him in jail. Boom. But also, let's have a listen to Tucker Carlson, talking about his time in Russia, talking about what happened to Navalny. Mitya, let's have a listen to what he said in relation to this. I think this is absolutely fascinating.
There's a lot of interesting ideas about if he was killed, who killed him. Yeah. Because it could be Putin. It could be somebody in Russia who's not Putin.
Yeah.
It could be Ukrainians, because it would benefit the war.
They killed Dugin's daughter in Moscow. So, yeah, it's possible.
Now, another element of this, of course, is how did Ukraine respond to Tucker's monster interview with Putin? Well over 1 billion views now. You know, decades of, tortuously paid for and implemented Western propaganda collapsed in 2 hours. How did they do it? They rolled out the big guns. Volodymyr Zelensky. He went on a little tour talking to anyone that would listen, but it kind of panned a bit. I think it got a couple of 100,000 views at the max. But he's absolutely sure that everything's going to go his way. The money's going to fly in. And he also, Mitya, had a little interview in a bunker situation, very close to the front lines, where you couldn't hear any bombs dropping, bullets flying, or anything whatsoever, right?
Yeah, let's take a look. I mean, it's very heroic.
Yeah.
To be there
heroic.
at this time.
Mr. President, thank you for the time.
Thank
Just
you.
a few kilometers.
The reality here is that Zelensky is actually so desperate to portray what he's done with Ukraine, and the deaths, 100,000 people. It's an absolute tragedy, a generation going under the ground. He's actually still talking, remarkably, get this, about another counteroffensive or counterflop, counterflunk, whatever it was they tried to do, which the only thing it actually did was put a lot of money in the pockets of the undertakers in Western Ukraine. He's actually thinking about doing this again. This is absolutely insane, right?
Well, maybe he just wants the money for it, right? Because if you have no chance of winning, why do you keep fighting? Mm-hmm. So you can understand his difficult situation.
And of course, when you're given all these high-profile videos talking about your new big budget movie, which they're going to make in Hollywood about you, which you're going to yourself, it's pretty tiring. And this is exactly what a tired guy looks like. It is. Let me just categorically say, this is not what somebody stoned out of their membrane looks like. This is somebody who looks tired. Mitya.
Let's take a look. I think he is pretty tired.
Mr. President, I just returned from several areas along the front line in the south and in the east, and soldiers there told me They have to ration their ammunition. Ooh. They don't have enough weapons to advance. Mm-hmm. They can only defend themselves. In some cases, they're losing territory.
Yeah.
What happens to your country if this American aid doesn't arrive?
We will lose a lot of people.
We will
lose
for sure.
territories.
Are they serious? Are they serious? Of course, Joe Biden can walk on a tightrope. Zelensky isn't stoned, and there's only 31,000 Ukrainians have died in this conflict. There you go, guys. Hey, anyway, look, I think some people think it's unfair to make fun of old President Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, the self-propelled grandfather, whatever you want to call him. But this week, he's really surpassed himself. And it got a bit spooky, actually. You know, somebody asked him, how does he keep going? How do you look so young? How do you look so great? How are you so sharp, President Biden? How are you like the head of a pin? Well, it's all down to a great sex life. Meet you. What the name of Jesus is going on with this?
Even Donald Trump wanted to, take a jab.
For a special caring touch, visiting angels care so much.
This is terrible. I mean, this is great. I mean, Trump is great. Trump is good at this. He's good at this stuff, right? He's good at this stuff. I mean, have you seen Trump doing the sort of impression of him on the podium, walking up? Just Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe's talking to himself. He's talking to people out there. He's shaking hands with the dead. Trump is good. Trump's on top of his game. Trump's wide awake. Come on. I mean, it's not even a contest anymore, right?
Jay, you know what I find amazing? That all of Biden's administration continuously needs to say, he was present, he could hear us, he was there.
Yeah. The president is very aware, never misrepresented anything. The president is very much active and passes a cognitive test every day. He gets it, understands what's going on, right? He has never misrepresented anything.
Which is an insane thing to talk about your president that way.
Oh, man. I mean, look, they're queuing up as well now. They smell the blood in the water, the sharks. You know, Kamala's saying, I'm ready to serve. She's ready to serve. Serve what? Serve dinner? I mean, I don't think Kamala. I mean, look, if it's a toss-up between Nikki Haley and Kamala, at least Nikki makes Kamala look smart. I mean, this is probably the only positive thing about it,
Yeah, but it's 340 million people in the country, and this
that's
is
the
who
best.
they find.
That's the cream rising to the top right there. Kamala,
that's democracy.
Nikki, and Trump, and Biden. That's spooky. Hey, so that's it from Moscow for tonight. We're here, we're present, we hear you, you hear us, and Mitya and I will see you next week. Come on, pretend you love me. Look, we can do it for all day. No, for 2 days. Spasibo.